Park was lost again. This was not unusual for her. The woman had a gift for finding the wrong corridor, the wrong elevator, and the wrong door in any building larger than a small house. On Earth, this had been a minor problem. On Station Helix 7, a massive orbital facility that stretched for kilometers in every direction, it was becoming her daily struggle. She looked at the small device in her hand. The map showed she needed to reach room 417B for the new staff orientation. She had been walking for 20 minutes. The hallways all looked the same: smooth white walls, soft blue lights, and doors marked with symbols from a dozen different alien languages. She studied alien plants, mostly moss and fungi. She was good at her job. She was terrible at navigation. Her colleagues back on Earth used to joke that she could get lost in her own apartment. They were not entirely wrong. She stopped at a door that looked correct. The number seemed right, though the alien symbols next to it were unfamiliar. She pressed her palm to the panel, and the door slid open with a soft hiss. The room was not what she expected. Instead of a small conference room with other new human staff members, found herself standing at the entrance of a large amphitheater. Curved rows of seats descended toward a central platform. Large windows showed the stars outside, and the walls were decorated with banners showing what looked like wolves standing on two legs. But the most surprising thing was the audience. 24 small creatures sat in the seats staring at her. They looked like wolf cubs, but they walked upright and wore simple clothing. Their fur was silver blue, shimmering under the lights. Their eyes were large and golden, filled with curiosity. Their ears stood tall and alert, pointed directly at her. Her heart began to beat faster. She knew what these creatures were. One of the oldest and most respected species in the Galactic Council. They were known for their strict traditions, their powerful military, and their pride. Adults stood over 2 meters tall and were considered dangerous warriors. These were not adults. These were children, probably between 8 and 12 years old in human terms. They were small, barely reaching chest. Their fur was fluffy and soft-looking. Their tails swayed gently behind them. They were also completely silent, watching her with an intensity that made her uncomfortable. Opened her mouth to apologize and leave. But before she could speak, something strange happened. The cubs moved. In one smooth motion, all 24 of them sat up. They tucked their tails beneath them. They folded their paws in their laps. Their ears tilted forward in perfect formation. Recognized the posture from her cultural training. This was the sign of respectful attention, the way students greeted a teacher they honored. They thought she was their teacher. Mind went blank. She looked around the room, searching for the real instructor, but there was no one else. The teaching platform was empty. A holographic display behind it showed text in the language that she could not read. She should correct them. She should explain that she was just a lost human who studied moss. She should apologize and leave immediately. But the cubs were watching her with such hope in their golden eyes, and who had never been good at disappointing anyone, found that she could not move. One of the cubs raised a paw. It was a small one sitting in the front row. Its fur was lighter than the others, almost white, and one of its ears had a small notch cut into it. Its voice was soft and eager. "Teacher, are you going to tell us about the War of Silence?" Blinked the what? "The War of Silence," the cub repeated. "The one your people won by doing nothing. Elder promised to bring a human to tell us the story, but he never did. Are you the human?" Had never heard of the War of Silence. She had no idea what the cub was talking about. But 24 pairs of golden eyes were watching her, waiting for an answer. She hesitated. "What do you know about it?" This was a trick she had learned in school. When you did not know the answer, ask a question instead. It usually worked on professors. She hoped it would work on alien wolf children. The cubs looked at each other. Then they began to speak, their voices overlapping with excitement. "The humans refused to fight. They sat in silence for 40 days. The enemy went crazy waiting. They won without firing a single weapon. Listened, her confusion growing. She had studied human history extensively, and she had never encountered this story. It sounded like a legend, exaggerated and changed through generations of retelling. But the cubs believed it completely. Their eyes shone with admiration as they described how humans had defeated a powerful enemy through patience alone. "Is it true?" the small cub with the notched ear asked. "Can humans really wait forever?" Thought about this. She thought about her grandmother, who had waited 7 years for her grandfather to return from war. She thought about her mother, who had worked 3 jobs for a decade to send her children to university. She thought about herself, spending 6 years in school to earn a degree that let her study alien moss. "We are very patient," she said finally. "When something matters to us, we can wait a very long time." The cubs made a sound, a soft chorus of amazement that sounded almost like purring. Their tails began to sway faster. Realized she was still standing in the doorway. Slowly, carefully, she walked down the steps toward the teaching platform. The cubs watched her every movement with intense focus. She reached the platform and turned to face them. 24 small faces looked up at her, waiting. She was trapped. She could not leave now without humiliating herself and confusing the cubs. She could not teach them because she had no idea what subject this class was supposed to cover. All she could do was wait for the real teacher to return and hope they would not be too angry. "So," she said, trying to keep her voice steady, "while we wait, why don't you tell me what else you have heard about humans?" The cubs erupted into noise. Every paw shot up. Every voice called out at once. They had been waiting their whole lives to ask these questions, and finally, a real human was standing before them. In the chaos, did not notice the door at the back of the room open. She did not see the tall figure that entered and stopped in shock. Elder had returned to find a human standing before his students. And his students were looking at her like she had hung the stars themselves. The cubs talked over each other like a river breaking through a dam. Their voices filled the amphitheater, each one trying to be heard above the others. Stood on the platform, overwhelmed but strangely touched by their excitement. "Is it true humans can run for days without stopping? I heard humans eat poison for fun. My father said humans tamed wolves and made them into friends. Can you really survive being cut open and sewn back together?" Raised her hands and the cubs fell silent immediately. Their discipline surprised her. These were children, but they had been trained to respect authority. She felt a small weight of responsibility settle on her shoulders. "One at a time," she said gently. "I will try to answer what I can." A cub in the middle row spoke first. It was larger than the others, with darker fur and a confident voice. "The persistence hunting. Is it real? Can humans truly chase prey until it dies from exhaustion?" Nodded slowly. "Yes, that is real. A long time ago, before we had tools and weapons, our ancestors would chase animals across great distances. We cannot run fast, but we can run for a very long time. We sweat to keep cool while other animals overheat. Eventually, the prey would collapse and our ancestors would catch it." The cubs exchanged glances of amazement. Their tails swayed in unison. "But we do not hunt like that anymore," added. "Now we buy our food from stores." "What is a store?" one cub asked. Smiled. "A place where food is kept, and you trade money for it." "You trade for food?" The dark-furred cub sounded confused. "You do not hunt together as a pack?" "Some humans grow food, some humans move food, some humans sell food. We all do different jobs and we trade with each other." This concept seemed to puzzle the cubs. Among the hunting was a community activity. The pack worked together and the kill was shared. The idea of trading for something as basic as food was strange to them. Another cub raised its paw. This one had spots of brown mixed into its silver fur. "Teacher, is Earth really a death world?" Paused. She had heard this term before. In galactic classification, a death world was a planet so dangerous that most species could not survive there without protection. Earth had earned this label, though humans rarely thought of their home that way. It depends on how you look at it, she said carefully. Earth has many dangers. We have extreme temperatures from burning deserts to frozen wastelands. We have storms that can destroy entire cities. We have earthquakes, volcanoes, floods, and fires. We have animals that can kill with venom, teeth, or claws. We have diseases that have killed millions of our people. The cubs listened with wide eyes, their ears pressed flat against their heads. But continued, Earth is also beautiful. We have forests and oceans, mountains and valleys. We have millions of different species living together, and humans learned to survive all of it. We adapted. We built shelters against the storms. We created medicine against the diseases. We made tools to protect ourselves from predators. How, the spotted cub whispered, how did you survive so much? Thought about this question. It was something she had never really considered before. On Earth, survival was simply what humans did. They did not think of themselves as special. We helped each other, she said finally. No human survives alone. We lived in groups, in families and tribes and villages. When one person was hurt, others took care of them. When one person was hungry, others shared their food. When danger came, we faced it together. The small cub with the notched ear had started thinking of it as the little one leaned forward. Its voice was quiet but clear. Is it true that humans protect things weaker than themselves, even if it costs them? The question hit harder than she expected. She looked at the little cub, so small compared to its classmates, with that distinctive notch in its ear. She wondered if this cub had ever been considered weak. She wondered if anyone had protected it. Yes, she said, that is true. Why? The question was simple, but the answer was not. Searched for the right words. Because strength is not just about being big or fast or powerful, she said slowly. Sometimes the strongest thing you can do is help someone who cannot help themselves. My grandmother used to say that anyone can be cruel. It takes no effort to hurt others or ignore their pain. But kindness requires strength. Choosing to protect someone when it would be easier to walk away, that is what makes us human. The cubs were silent. Even their tails had stopped moving. They watched with an expression she could not quite read. Then the little one spoke again. Elder says the weak must be left behind so the pack can survive. He says this is the natural way. Felt a flash of anger, quickly controlled. She did not know Elder, but she already did not like his philosophy. Different species have different ways, she said carefully. I can only tell you about humans, and humans believe that the weak are often just people who have not been given a chance yet. A sick person can become healthy. A small person can grow. A struggling person can learn. If you abandon them before they have a chance, you lose everything they could have become. She paused, then added, some of the greatest humans in our history were considered weak when they were young. They were sick or small or different, but someone believed in them. Someone protected them, and they grew up to change the world. The cubs began to whisper among themselves. Could not understand their words, but she could see the effect her words were having. They were thinking, questioning, considering ideas that went against everything they had been taught. The little cub stood up from its seat. It walked down the steps toward the platform, its small paws making soft sounds on the floor. When it reached, it looked up at her with those enormous golden eyes. Teacher, it said, what is your name? Park. Teacher Park, the cub repeated as if testing the sound. I am Tally. I am the smallest in my litter. My brothers say I should have been left on the ice, but I am still here. Felt her heart tighten. She knelt down so she was at eye level with the small cub. Tally, being small does not mean being weak. Some of the bravest people I know are small. They have to be brave every day just to exist in a world made for bigger people. Tally's tail wagged once, twice. I like you, Teacher Park. You are strange, but you are kind." Before could respond, the sound of the door opening echoed through the amphitheater. She looked up to see a tall figure standing at the entrance, a fully grown, easily over 2 meters tall, with dark fur and cold silver eyes. Elder had been watching, he had heard everything. And from the look on his face, he was not pleased. "What," he said, his voice like ice, "is the meaning of this?" The cubs turned to look at him, but they did not move from their seats. They did not show the same eager attention they had given. They simply waited. Tally, still standing beside, spoke with a courage that seemed too large for such a small body. "Elder, we have learned more in 10 minutes than in 10 days. The silence that followed was deafening. Elder moved down the steps like a storm approaching. His claws clicked against the floor with each step, and his silver eyes never left. The cubs shrank back in their seats, their earlier courage fading in the presence of their true instructor. Only Tally remained standing beside, though the small cub was trembling slightly. Stopped at the edge of the platform. Up close, he was enormous. His shoulders were broad, his arms thick with muscle beneath the fur. A long scar ran across his muzzle, a mark of some ancient battle. Everything about him spoke of power and authority. "Human," he said, the word sounding like an insult. "Explain yourself. Why are you in my classroom, filling my students' heads with your soft ideas?" Straightened her back. She was afraid, but she had learned long ago not to show fear to those who expected it. "I apologize, Elder. I was looking for room 417B and entered the wrong door by mistake. The cubs were alone, and they thought I was a substitute teacher. I did not want to confuse them by leaving immediately." "So you decided to teach them instead?" His voice dripped with contempt. "You, a creature from a death world, thought you could teach cubs about survival." "I was only answering their questions." Questions they should never have asked. Turned to glare at the cubs, who pressed themselves deeper into their seats. "You have forgotten your place. You have forgotten your training. A stranger walks into your classroom and you treat her like a master." Tally's small voice spoke up. "She told us about humans, Elder, about how they survive by helping each other. It was interesting." His head snapped toward the small cub. "Interesting? The weak helping the weak is not interesting, little one. It is foolishness. It is why humans nearly destroyed their own world. It is why they needed generations to reach the stars while we built empires." Felt her hands clench at her sides. She knew she should stay quiet. She knew she should apologize again and leave. But something in his words sparked a fire in her chest that she could not ignore. "Humans reached the stars," she said quietly. "We may have taken longer, but we got there, and we did it without leaving anyone behind." Turned to face her, his eyes narrowing. "Is that so? You stand in my classroom, insult my teaching, and now you dare to argue with me." "I did not mean to insult anyone. I only spoke the truth as I know it." "The truth as you know it," smiled, but there was no warmth in it. "Very well, human, let us test your truth. I challenge you to a teaching duel." The cubs gasped. Even Tally took a step back, ears flattening against their head. Frowned. "A teaching duel." "An old tradition," explained. "Two teachers, one topic. Each presents their lesson and the students judge whose teaching was more valuable. If you believe your ideas have merit, prove it. Stand against me and let the cubs decide." His heart raced. This was insane. She was not a teacher. She studied moss and fungi. She had no training in education, no experience in public speaking, no knowledge of customs or history. She would be humiliated. But she looked at the cubs, 24 small faces watching her with a mixture of fear and hope. She looked at Tally, the smallest one, who had spoken up when no one else would. She thought about everything she had just told them about courage and protecting the weak. If she walked away now, what would they learn? That humans talked big but ran when things got hard, that their words were empty. "What is the topic?" she asked. Smile widened. He had not expected her to accept. "Survival. The most fundamental lesson any living creature can learn. You have 1 hour to prepare. 1 hour nodded slowly. I accept. The cubs erupted into whispers. Silence them with a look. Return here in 1 hour, he said too, and we will see if your soft human ideas can survive against true wisdom. He turned and walked out of the amphitheater, his claws clicking against the floor. The cubs watched him go, then turned back with wonder in their eyes. Teacher Park, Tally whispered, are you really going to fight Elder? Not fight, said, though her voice was not as steady as she wanted. Just talk, I hope. She hurried out of the room, her mind racing. She needed help. She needed someone who knew this station, who knew how to talk to people, who could help her figure out what to say. She needed was the opposite of in almost every way. Where she was quiet, he was loud. Where she was shy, he was confident. Where she got lost in hallways, he seemed to know every corner of the station by heart. He was an engineer who had been on Helix 7 for 3 years, fixing broken machines and making friends with everyone he met. Found him in the engineering bay, covered in grease and humming a song she did not recognize. She said breathlessly, I need help. He looked up, saw the panic on her face, and immediately set down his tools. What happened? Are you okay? Explained everything in a rush, the wrong door, the cubs, Elder, the challenge. By the time she finished, was laughing so hard he had to lean against a wall for support. You got adopted by alien wolf children, he wheezed, and now you have to duel their teacher. Only you could get into this situation. This is not funny. I have less than an hour to prepare a lesson on survival, and I don't know what to say. Wiped tears from his eyes and took a deep breath. Okay, let me think. He began to pace, his expression growing serious. Survival, what does that even mean to the Elder? Talked about the weak being left behind, about the natural order. Nodded slowly. They come from a harsh world, ice and mountains, predators everywhere. Their ancestors survived by being ruthless. Only the strongest made it through the winters. It's built into their culture. So how do I argue against that? You don't argue against it. You show them a different way, a human way. Stopped packing and faced her. What do you know about human survival? Not from books, from life. What has your family taught you? She thought about her grandmother, who had survived a war by hiding in the mountains with her children. She thought about her mother, who had worked endless hours to give her family a better life. She thought about her brother, who ran into burning buildings to save strangers. We help each other, she said slowly. When things are hardest, we help each other. Exactly, gripped her shoulders. That's your lesson. The think survival means being the strongest individual. Humans know that survival means being the strongest group. We don't leave people behind because every person is valuable. The old teach the young. The strong protect the weak. And when disaster comes, we face it together. Nodded, feeling something click into place. It's not about beating them in a debate. It's about showing them a different truth. Now you've got it, smiled. Go tell those little wolf cubs what it means to be human. And yes, don't forget to breathe. Return to the amphitheater with 5 minutes to spare. The cubs were already in their seats, their eyes bright with anticipation. Elder stood on one side of the platform, his arms crossed, his expression cold. Took her place on the other side. The teaching duel was about to begin. The amphitheater was completely silent. 24 cubs sat in perfect rows, their golden eyes moving between Elder and like spectators at a sporting match. The tension in the air was thick enough to touch. Spoke first, his deep voice filling the room without effort. The topic is survival. I will go first, as is the right of the challenged instructor. He turned to face the cubs, his posture commanding and powerful. Listen well, young ones. What I teach you today may save your lives. He began to pace across the platform, his claws clicking with each step. Survival is the first law of nature. Before there were civilizations, before there were starships, before there was anything, there was survival. The universe does not care about your feelings. It does not reward kindness or punish cruelty. It simply is. And in this universe, only the strong survive. The cubs nodded. This was familiar teaching. This was what they had heard all their lives. Our ancestors understood this truth, continued. On the winters were long and brutal. Food was scarce. Predators hunted in the darkness. Every resource spent on the weak was a resource taken from the strong. And so our ancestors made a choice, a hard choice, but a necessary one. He paused, letting the silence build. The culling winters, you have heard of them. When food grew short and the cold grew deep, those who could not contribute were left behind, the sick, the old, the small. His eyes flicked toward Tally for just a moment. It was not cruelty, it was survival. The pack could not carry those who could not walk. The strong had to live so that the species could continue. Watched the cubs' faces. Some nodded in agreement. Others looked uncomfortable but said nothing. Tally sat very still, ears pressed flat against their head. This is the natural order, declared. The strong lead, the weak follow or fall. This is how empires are built. This is how species conquer the stars. Humans spent thousands of years crawling through mud while we built fleets. Why? Because they wasted their strength protecting those who could not protect themselves. He turned to face directly, a cold smile on his face. Survival is not about kindness. It is not about hope. It is about strength. Remember this, cubs, and you will never be weak. Step back, signaling that his lesson was complete. The cubs turned their attention to. Her heart was pounding. Her palms were sweating. Every word had spoken was wrong, but he had spoken with such confidence, such authority. How could she compete with that? She closed her eyes for a moment. She thought of her grandmother's face. She thought of words. She thought of Tally, the smallest cub who was still alive despite everything. She opened her eyes and began to speak. Elder is right about one thing. The universe does not care about us. It is cold and empty and dangerous. Survival is not guaranteed to anyone. The cubs looked surprised. They had expected her to argue. Instead, she was agreeing. But he is wrong about what survival means. Now she had their attention. I come from Earth. You have heard that it is a death world, and this is true. My planet has tried to kill my species in countless ways. We have faced ice ages that lasted thousands of years. We have faced plagues that killed half our population. We have faced predators with teeth and claws far more dangerous than our soft bodies. We have faced storms, floods, fires, earthquakes, and volcanoes. She paused, looking at each cub in turn. And yet we survived, not because we were the strongest, not because we were the fastest, not because we abandoned our weak. We survived because we refused to give up on each other. She stepped forward, her voice growing stronger. Let me tell you about my grandmother. Her name was Park. When she was young, a great war came to our land. Soldiers burned her village. Her husband was taken away and she never saw him again. She was left alone with 4 children, no food, and winter approaching. The cubs were silent, their ears tilted forward. According to Elder's logic, she should have left the weakest children behind. The youngest was sick. The oldest was injured. Keeping them alive would use precious resources, but my grandmother did not leave anyone behind. She carried her children on her back. She walked for 30 kilometers through the mountains. She begged for food from strangers. She worked until her hands bled. His voice trembled slightly, but she did not stop. All 4 children survived. One of them was my mother, and because my grandmother refused to give up, I exist. I am standing here, talking to you, because one woman decided that survival meant keeping everyone alive, not just herself. She looked directly at Tally now. Scientists on Earth once found the bones of a man who lived thousands of years ago. His leg had been badly broken. It was the kind of injury that should have killed him. He could not walk, could not hunt, could not contribute, but the bone had healed. Do you understand what that means? The cubs shook their heads. It means someone took care of him. Someone brought him food and water. Someone protected him while he was helpless. Someone decided that his life was worth saving, even though it cost them. That is what makes us human, not our brains or our tools, our willingness to carry each other. She spread her hands, including all the cubs in her gesture. Elder asks why humans took so long to reach the stars. I will tell you why, because we brought everyone with us. Every step we took as a species, we took together. The old taught the young. The strong protected the weak. And when disaster came, we faced it as one. She took a breath, steadying herself for the final part. My brother is named. He is a firefighter, someone who runs into burning buildings to save strangers. Every time he goes to work, he risks his life for people he has never met. People who will never repay him. People who might even be cruel to him. He does it anyway, because that is what humans do. Looked at, then back at the cubs. You can build an empire by being strong. You can conquer worlds by being ruthless, but empires fall. Conquerors are forgotten. What lasts, what truly survives, is the choice to be kind when it would be easier to be cruel, to protect when it would be safer to abandon, to carry someone who cannot walk, even when the road is long. She knelt down so she was at eye level with the front row. The weak are not a burden, they are a gift. They teach us patience. They teach us compassion. They teach us that strength is not measured by what you can take, but by what you can give. And sometimes the smallest and weakest among us grow up to change everything. Silence filled the amphitheater. Then stepped forward. Enough sentiment. Cubs, it is time to choose. Stand on my side of the room if you believe my lesson was more valuable. Stand on the human side if you believe hers was. No one moved at first. Then Tally stood up. The small cub walked down the steps, crossed the platform, and stood beside. Their tail was wagging, and their golden eyes were bright with something that looked like hope. One by one, the other cubs followed. The dark-furred cub who had asked about persistence hunting. The spotted cub who had asked about Earth. Every single one of them, leaving their seats and walking to stand with the human who had wandered into the wrong room. 24 cubs stood beside. Side of the room was empty. His face twisted with fury. His claws dug into his palms. For a moment, thought he might attack her, but instead, he simply turned and walked out of the amphitheater without another word. The door closed behind him with a sound like a verdict. Tally looked up at, tail wagging faster. Teacher Park, the small cub said, we choose the lesson that teaches us to live, not just to last. Did not know whether to laugh or cry. So she did both. Word spread across Station Helix 7 like fire through dry grass. A human had accidentally walked into a classroom, taught the cubs forbidden ideas about weakness and kindness, and defeated Elder in a teaching duel. The story was so strange that most people assumed it was exaggerated, but the truth was even stranger than the rumors. Tried to return to her normal life. She went back to her laboratory, back to her moss samples and fungi cultures. She told herself that the teaching duel was just an accident, a misunderstanding, a story she would laugh about in a few years. But the cubs had other plans. On the first morning after the duel, arrived at her laboratory to find Tally sitting outside the door. The small cub looked up at her with those enormous golden eyes and wagged their tail. Good morning, Teacher Park. Blinked Tally, what are you doing here? Waiting for you. You said survival means helping each other. I want to learn more. Before could respond, she heard footsteps behind her. She turned to see more cubs approaching 5, then 10, then all 24 of them, walking down the corridor in a neat line. They sat down outside her laboratory, tails tucked, ears forward in that same posture of respectful attention. They had come for class. Looked at them helplessly. I have work to do, I cannot teach you. We can wait, Tally said simply. You said humans are very patient. We want to be patient like humans." They did not move. They did not complain. They simply sat there waiting, their golden eyes fixed on her with absolute trust. Went into her laboratory and tried to focus on her research. She lasted about 30 minutes before guilt drove her back outside. The cubs were still there, still waiting, still watching. She sighed, "Fine, one lesson, then you go back to your regular classes." The cubs' tails began to wag in unison. One lesson became two. Two became five. By the end of the week was spending more time with the cubs than with her moss samples. She taught them about Earth, about its oceans and mountains, its cities and villages, its history of struggle and survival. She taught them about human culture, about families and friends, about stories and songs, about the way humans formed bonds with everything around them, even machines and animals and strangers. The cubs absorbed every word like sponges. They asked questions constantly. They practiced human phrases. They tried to understand concepts that had no equivalent in culture. But not everyone was happy. Elder had not forgotten his humiliation. He complained to the diplomatic corps. He demanded that the human be punished for interfering with education. He claimed that was deliberately trying to corrupt the cubs with alien ideas. The diplomatic corps listened. Tensions rose, and soon received a summons she had been dreading. She was called before the station council. The council chamber was enormous, a circular room with 12 raised platforms arranged in a ring. On each platform sat a representative from one of the major species on the station. In the center was a single spot where was told to stand. She had never felt smaller in her life. Elder was there, standing off to one side with a look of triumph on his face. Beside him stood several other officials, all of them glaring at with open hostility. But she was not alone. Had insisted on coming, standing just behind her with his arms crossed, and somewhere in the observation gallery above, she could see small silver-blue faces watching. The cubs had found a way to sneak in. The head of the council, an ancient creature named Prelate, clicked their mandibles for attention. "Park of Earth," said their voice like rustling leaves. "You have been brought before this council to answer for your actions. Elder claims that you invaded his classroom, taught unauthorized lessons to cubs, and humiliated him in a teaching duel. What do you say to these charges?" Took a deep breath. I walked into the wrong room by mistake. The cubs thought I was their substitute teacher. I answered their questions while waiting for Elder to return. When he challenged me to a duel, I accepted because I did not want to appear cowardly. I did not seek to humiliate anyone. I only spoke the truth as I know it. "The truth as you know it," sneered. She filled my students' heads with dangerous ideas. She told them that weakness should be protected, that the strong should sacrifice for the helpless. This goes against everything they stand for. "Does it?" asked quietly. The chamber fell silent. "I have been studying history," continued. "Not just the culling winters, but everything, and I found something interesting. Do you know why they survived the first Great Plague 3,000 years ago? It was not because the strong abandoned the weak. It was because healers chose to stay with the sick, even when it meant risking their own lives. Half of those healers died, but they saved enough of the population to continue." His eyes widened. That is different." "Is it? Your ancestors made a choice to protect others, even at personal cost. That choice saved your species. The culling winters came later when resources were scarce and fear was high. But it was not the only way your people survived. It was not even the best way." Prelate leaned forward, their compound eyes glittering with interest. "You have done your research, human, but this does not answer the question of whether you should have taught cubs." Nodded. "You are right. I should not have been there. I should not have taught them. But I was there and I did teach them, and I cannot take it back. The only question now is what happens next." She looked up at the gallery, where the cubs were watching. "Those children came to my laboratory every day this week. I did not ask them to come. I did not encourage them. They came because they wanted to learn. They wanted to understand a different way of thinking. Is that a crime? Is curiosity something to be punished? The cubs, their assigned instructor, another council member pointed out. They chose a different lesson. Is that not what education is supposed to teach? How to think, how to question, how to make choices for themselves. Stepped forward angrily. This is manipulation. She has twisted their minds against their own culture. I have done nothing but answer their questions honestly, said firmly. If honesty is manipulation, then perhaps your culture's foundations are not as strong as you think. The chamber erupted into noise. Voices overlapped as representatives argued among themselves, looked ready to leap at, but the other officials held him back. Prelate clicked their mandibles loudly, and silence returned. The council will deliberate, the prelate announced. All parties will wait for our decision. The waiting was the hardest part. Stood in the center of the chamber, trying not to shake, placed a hand on her shoulder, a silent gesture of support. Above them, the cubs pressed their faces against the gallery railing, watching with anxious eyes. Finally, Prelate spoke. The council has reached a decision. Park did not seek to invade the classroom or humiliate Elder. She walked into the wrong room and responded to the situation with honesty. The cubs chose her lesson freely, as is their right as thinking beings. Opened his mouth to protest, but the prelate silenced him with a look. However, we cannot ignore the impact she has had. The cubs have changed. They think differently now. They question what they once accepted. This is either a great gift or a great danger, depending on how it is handled. The prelate's eyes fixed on. We offer you a choice, Park. You may return to your xenobiology work and forget this ever happened. The cubs will be returned to their regular education, and this incident will be recorded as a minor misunderstanding. Felt her heart sink. That was the safe choice, the easy choice. Or, the prelate continued, you may accept a formal teaching position at the academy, a new course on human philosophy of mutual aid. You would teach not only these cubs but any who wish to learn. The choice is yours. His mind raced. She was not a teacher. She had never wanted to be a teacher. She had spent her whole life studying moss, avoiding attention, getting lost in hallways. But then she looked at the gallery. Tally was leaning over the railing, tail wagging, golden eyes filled with hope. The other cubs stood beside them, all of them watching, all of them waiting. She thought about her grandmother, who had carried 4 children through the mountains. She thought about her brother, who ran into burning buildings for strangers. She thought about what it meant to be human. I accept, she said. The cubs erupted into cheers. Their howls of joy echoed through the council chamber, startling the delegates. Tally scrambled down from the gallery and ran across the chamber floor, throwing themselves at and wrapping their small arms around her waist. Thank you, Teacher Park, Tally whispered. Thank you for staying. Hugged them back, tears streaming down her face. Was grinning beside her. Well, looks like you found your calling after all. The woman who studies moss is now teaching the next generation of alien diplomats. I have no idea what I am doing, admitted. That is the most human thing you could say, Tally said, their tail wagging faster. Laughed. It was shaky and tearful, but it was real. She had walked into the wrong room. She had stumbled into a world she did not understand. She had challenged traditions older than human civilization. And somehow, impossibly, she had found a family. In the weeks that followed, her classroom grew. First the 24 cubs, then their siblings, then cubs from other classes who had heard the stories. Other species began to attend, curious, thoughtful amphibians, even a few young adults who wanted to understand what the fuss was about. Taught them all the same things. That strength was not about power but about choice. That the weak were not burdens but gifts. That survival meant carrying each other, no matter how long the road. And in the records of Station Helix 7, The story was preserved for future generations. The legend of Teacher Park, the human who walked into the wrong room and taught a generation of aliens what it meant to carry each other home. Years later, when asked how she started the revolution that changed philosophy forever, would simply shrug. "I got lost," she would say. "I just got lost." But Tally, now grown tall and strong and serving as an ambassador between worlds, would always add the rest of the story. "She got lost, and then she helped us find ourselves.